guys, welcome back to Location 1980 Art Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Fortune, and my co-host, Eric Ringman. And we're here tonight with Dr. James Trolinger, scientist, physicist, and also an artist. So that's why you're on the program. Tonight, we'd like to talk a lot about what you do in science and lasers and technology, but also your art background and art history. And that's how we know each other.
Yeah.
Proper introduction should be that Jim's a friend of the studio and also a mentor of mine. And he's been a supporter of the arts as long as I known him for the entire 14 years we've been here at Location 1980. So we're stoked to share Jim's art story with the rest of the world. And we're just going to start with a few questions. Jim, you, I mean, do you mind if we ask how old you are? Or near there?
I'm not quite 84.
All right. What do you call that? An octogenarian?
I'm afraid so.
All right. Right on. So, how did you get started in art? Like, what was your first experiences in art?
Well, my mother was an excellent amateur artist. So she started teaching me drawing very young. So I learned how to draw pictures of dogs and animals and horses and things like that. And when I was 4, 5, 6 years old. So that got me a good start and got my interest in it. So immediately when I went into school, I got more involved in art in the first and second grades. And
where was this at, Jim? Where were you from again? You're from Tennessee?
This is from Shelbyville, Tennessee, the walking horse capital of the world.
Do you know about walking horses?
I do not. I am uninformed about the walking horses.
Well, a good walking horse has what's called gaits, different ways of walking. And you have like a 6 or 7 or 8 gait horse, and they just go around a circle, and the announcer calls out what gate to go to. And the people, it's a big deal. People raise horses, and then people make their living raising walking horses and training walking horses.
And where you're from, Shelbyville. Shelbyville is the capital.
Yeah, it's the capital, the world capital.
World capital, right?
I like it.
So when you were young, did you draw horses then, or paint horses? Because that's a difficult subject matter.
Well, my mother taught me how to draw animals first. Teach me how to draw a square. So I had what's called the box dog or the box horse that was made up of squares. And it took me a little while to really learn how to draw a real horse.
Right on. And I remember you telling me once you did have an art teacher or a mentor before your formal, before you
I did. When in the second grade, I got more heavily involved in art and did quite well in some art contests. And through a long series of happenings, I wound up studying under a local master, a lady named Corinne Houston, who was quite well known around the area. And I painted with her for the next maybe 10 years.
Oh, wow. And so that's like outside of school, like after school and stuff like that?
And this is starting like what, your teenage 20s at this point? Or
no, I started working with her when I was about 7 or 8 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I was painting with oil paints when I was 7 years old. So, I mean, she furnished everything.
Nice.
That's neat. That's good for your mom to pair you up with her. Jim, and then so when did you switch from so if you did that much training, which is much more than most Americans, I think, at the time regarding art, and then when you got into high school and college, what made you change to physics? Well,
art was always a side thing that it kept me from going crazy, I think. I loved to draw. But I was interested in careers, and the universe was quite kind to me with timing, because by the time I was up in high school, that was when Russia launched Sputnik. And at that point, the floodgates opened for educational funds for engineers. So that was a good way to make a living. So I started college with money based on the space program backgrounds. And I continued to draw and paint during this time, but I was a serious engineering student. And for the next 10 years till I went all the way through to get a PhD.
Well, what was your first like bachelor's degree or your first academic accomplishment?
I got a BS in engineering physics from the University of Tennessee, and that was 68, 67, 68.
Okay. Coming right up into the summer of love there.
I worked through the summers. I would work as a co-op student at an engineering facility, at an Air Force facility. I go to school a quarter. And then eventually I took a fellowship, but I followed the golden rule. The one who has the most gold makes the rules. So I got a scholarship at Louisiana State University and did my master's degree there. And by this time I knew enough people I could move back to the University of Tennessee. And there I got a PhD at a place. It was a University of Tennessee facility called the University of Tennessee Space Institute.
Okay.
So I was still studying in physics and space studies.
Now, at that time, now that your career is a little more thorough in academia and your early profession, were you still kind of doing art on the side? Or?
Oh, yeah. I never gave up art. It was... when I was in school, at my lowest points, you know, students go up and down. At my lowest points, art was always the thing that saved me. I would go out and paint and come back feeling calm and then study and pass tests.
So you use it as a meditative tool?
It was a meditative tool, yeah. I didn't actually know how it worked, but it just worked. So I always knew that I could do art. And some of the classes seemed extremely hard, and you're always worried that you're going to pass this, you're going to get to the next step. So, but art, I knew I could do that. So I painted wherever I was. It kept me going.
And we know each other from painting both landscapes and then also studying the figure. Is that something that you were doing then while you're still getting your postgraduates?
It was all landscapes and some portraiture. I did some portraits, but not. I didn't really know how to do the figure well then. It was not as easy as it is. Getting models is something that was not something I had available.
Were you still in Tennessee at that point?
I was doing this some and. When I was in Baton Rouge at LSU, then back in Tennessee again. There were a lot of nice mountains and trees and lakes and things to paint, so I did paint some of those and sailboats but not so much figures.
Okay. When you were starting off with your mentor, and then even after that, and you continued your art side. Therapy art during college and your postgraduate. Did you have like any other artists in particular? Like at the time, I'm sure. What was like your influence? Like was it Picasso or I don't know who was big at the time, at the exact time when you were.
I was still really in love with the great masters and especially the Dutch masters.
Van Dyck and
Rembrandt and Vermeer, and I love Vermeer's work. And
yeah, those guys since you're into holography, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Did you ever think that they were cheating or whatever? They had the looking glass, or some people said they had a camera back then, but nobody knew about it.
I think
because they were the first ones to have like the photorealistic. You know,
it's pretty well known, especially Vermeer. You can almost show that he was using lenses and. They had special kinds of, I forget what they call the cameras that they use, but
obscure or something.
Obscure, yeah.
Okay.
They use those things, and I think it's all right. I mean, those are just like tools for art.
Still got to paint
it. It's great. Whatever it takes to make your art, use it.
Yes, that's a good one.
Did those interests kind of like one inform the other? Because I see that a lot of your professional work and your academic pursuit is around optics and optical phenomena, and like did any of that interest get generated out of the fact that art was so important to you, just looking and portraying and seeing and witnessing? Is there a crossover?
Again, I got very lucky with the timing of the universe. When I was in maybe the second or third year of college, lasers were invented. That was in the early 60s, 1960s. Then holography was invented around 64 or 5, and I'm right in the middle of school. So, and I was working at an Air Force center, alternately with going to school, where I was working with optics. So it was a natural for me to take up lasers and optics and holography. So I got into holography right from its very beginning, and I was able to meet and work with some of the first holographers. So, and that kind of blended with art, because there were also a lot of art holographers who were, even Salvador Dali, for example, he did some use of holography. Don Close was another one. They did some holographic art. There's a whole society now, the holographic artists.
And you're an esteemed member of the Holo Knights, are you not?
Oh, yeah. That's the whole field of holography developed around those people who were started when holography first started.
Oh, okay.
And eventually, enough of us connected that we formed this society called the International Holo Knights. We still pick a Holo Knight every year.
So have you been picked one time? Or have you been knighted?
Oh, I was knighted maybe 20 years ago in San Diego.
That's great. I mean, we were at your house the other day and we saw one of your holograms. Did you make that? So you can make holograms from scratch?
I've made some holograms. In fact, I made a hologram in honor of Vermeer. I said, here's what Vermeer would have done when he painted the girl with the pearl earring.
Okay.
And I made this hologram. We hired a model. We set it all up. I call this thing the other pearl, because in this hologram, you can look around and see on the other side of her face that second pearl.
Oh, nice.
And not only that, you can also see some things that...
yeah, a little wider camera angle.
Yeah.
I'm sure she was a good model. Eric, do you want to take one of these?
So I said that's what Vermeer would have done if holography would have been available to him.
I'm sure he would have.
Well, and I know a lot of your relationship with Jesse is in doing plein air, doing on-location stuff. And it sounds like that's something that you were doing from the very beginning. Can you speak more to what influenced that and what's rewarding about that whole process?
Because in the career I was in, I traveled a lot. And I needed something to keep me busy when I'm not working. So I painted. And so I started painting in different countries, mostly sketching and drawing, but some painting. And as painting kits got more and more sophisticated, I could carry everything with me. And
you said, they might not have heard you, painting kits. So you mean just everything you need to go on a plane or a train.
Yeah.
And have it compacted to where you can use the paint and store it without getting super messy.
I have everything I need right here. I can do a painting with watercolor pencils and water brushes.
Yeah.
And so I can put the brush. You can do a little painting. And I'm always ready. I have a book. A sketchbook.
That's right. That's what we like.
For those of you that are listening to this audio only, maybe in your car or something, he's pulling things out of his vest that he's prepped and ready to go right now in studio.
Yeah, Jim has been a mentor to me in for many ways, but mostly in plein air painting. And it was the first time we went to Death Valley when I realized I was underprepared. When he could just do that. He didn't have to go to the car or have a bag. He just whipped stuff out of his pockets and started painting in the train station or at the bus stop. And I learned a lot from that. It's like it helps to be prepared. Jim, could you share, maybe if you were to guess, how many countries have you got to sketch or paint in?
I lost count after about 35 countries. So I painted in over 30 countries around the world. And so,
what would you say some of your more memorable occurrences were, like a bridge, the Eiffel Tower?
I had a lot of interesting experiences, and people are always coming up and asking you questions, and they have the standard questions that, oh, my son paints, and they want to tell you about themselves as well. So wherever I'm sketching, there's always some kind of a story or something that develops. And one of my favorite stories is I was painting a little girl on a train, and she saw me, and she came to walk by and see what I was doing, and I kind of covered it up, and then she went back and she got her paper out. She started drawing. And we finally, after maybe half an hour, we pulled into a station, and she and her father were getting off. So they walked by me, and she handed me this painting. She had painted me. So I showed her the painting I had done of her. And so it was kind of fun that way.
That's great. Yeah, Jim, I was lucky enough to, you invited me when we first met. So you came to 1980 right out of the gate to figure drawing workshops. And that was maybe 13, 14 years ago. Since then, you've been to almost every workshop we've had. Yeah. And then one day he said, this is probably 10 years ago, he said, well, I'll go to paint in Death Valley if you'll come out there with me. And I'm like, what is going on in Death Valley? Like, it's just a desert. Like, you know, and I'm not, you know, I'm from Missouri, Jim's from Tennessee, but he had done it before. He said, believe me, you know, it's wonderful and amazing. And I was like, all right, I'll go. And we went out there, and I was just blown away, you know. And since then, we've painted in multiple countries now together, all over California.
I had been painting in Death Valley for many years. I mean, when I traveled a lot to California on business as an engineer, and I quite often would go through Death Valley, so I always painted there. And so when I started at Location 1980, I commented that I love painting in Death Valley, and people, what would you paint in Death Valley? And that's when I said, let's go and I'll show you. And it's so beautiful. Every artist who went wanted to go back.
Yeah. Well, the only person who would ask what's there to paint in Death Valley is someone who's never been to Death Valley.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've been there.
I have been. I've not painted there, but I have been. Yeah, and it is gorgeous. Yeah. Anyone listening, I recommend it, artist or otherwise.
And when you paint it, you start seeing things you didn't see until you painted it. There's so many things that you start seeing colors that other people look at it, and I don't think they see what we see as an artist. You look, all of a sudden you see colors and you see shapes and you see beauty that you wouldn't see if you hadn't painted it.
Well, to be able to sit in one spot for such a long time, even that act must give a whole different appreciation than someone who's just passing through.
Exactly, yeah, and every artist sees it different. That's really exciting to see what different artists, what really excites them. Like Jesse got excited over a particular Joshua tree, and yeah, I think it was a Joshua tree, wasn't it?
I think it was in Death Valley. It was mesquite.
Mesquite, maybe it was. Anyway, we were all going somewhere else. No, I'm going to paint this tree. So I wound up talking him out of the painting. I love that painting. He did such a beautiful job of it.
He's got it. And you know, one thing I'd like to share with the audience too, Jim, since I've been with you on these trips, because when we go to these trips, Jim comes up with this whole plan. I mean, it's like a college syllabus, and it's dense and pretty figured out, but he always has a suggestion that these are a loose guideline of what we may or may not do. At noon, we may go here and paint this, but if it's raining, maybe we don't do it. And then at the end of the day, so in a normal painting day, you can get probably 2 really good paintings in, 2 different locations. You paint all morning at the sand dunes, and then you go to lunch, and then you paint all afternoon and somewhere else. And then in the evening, and this has been every time we've been to Spain, England, all over California, and every time we try to set up a critique at the end of the, you know, we're talking about art, so like a lot of artists think that word critique's a bad word, or they don't want to get critiqued, or they're scared of a critique, but these critiques are really nice, and it's pretty honest, because at the end of the day, you're wore out, and you're very efficient with your assessment of other people's work, as well as your own work, but we would have wine and cheese, and we'd either be in a hotel room or on a park bench or whatever we could do, and you just slap your painting down however you can get it, and every person just gets a chance to either talk about their work, or we all talk about everyone's work. And we're mostly offering suggestions to how to make it better immediately. And what's cool is the next day you're going to paint something you're going to be able to use that information immediately. So it's kind of neat. And Jim brought that to my attention. So now I like to do that here more often than not, and just like kind of educate younger artists that, you know, you don't have to have the strongest chin in the world to talk openly about your work or someone else's work. It only makes you a little bit better. We've had some interesting critiques too.
Yeah, and quite often in those critiques, somebody will make a suggestion, as Jesse says, it comes in extremely useful the next day. And not only, sometimes you can actually go away, and I've seen people say, you know, if you crop that off, it'd be a better painting. And it is. I mean, some of these things turn out improving the paintings. Or you should have had, how about adding something? Quite often it improves the painting.
Yeah, it does help just the group. And Jim is responsible for that. And a lot of times too, he'll do this real elaborate, you know, the email, it's all figured out. And then I heard a number of artists, where are we meeting again? Or what happened? And Jim like, did you read the damn email? Like, it's all there. And also too for your workshop. So here at 1980, we do a lot of figure drawing workshops. And Eric, you've participated in these.
Oh, many.
So our audience, if you don't know what that means, is a live model, nude model, could be male or female, could be costumed, but it's usually model posing anywhere from 1 minute to, we did one earlier this month that was 12 hours, 2 days straight of the same pose, and then you can critique, and Jim has put together several. Those books. There's a whole stack.
We're going to bring a few on set here. We published some books here in 1980.
Several books. Jim's been responsible for cooking up really good ideas, just revolving around figure drawing. So instead of just a normal session, we're doing something really cool. Yeah. Thank you. So Eric, go ahead and give them a little taste of what we got going on there now.
Let's see. Yeah, and remember, we got to keep this interesting for the people that are only listening to it on stereo.
The books are mostly meant to capture what we did.
So we've got Capturing Andalusia, 7 Artists Find the Secret. So this is, I'm assuming, everybody that was on the tour. Yeah. That's here on the cover of that. And I mean, these are really nice format things. And so we've got views of the actual locations in here, and then there's a lot of the artwork that was produced while on these trips, and that's everything from sketches to finished work I'm seeing in here by everybody that was there. And then there's some writing. Now, did you do the writing?
I did most of the writing, yeah.
Okay, and so we're not going to do a live reading of the whole book here, of course, but could you maybe describe for the audience, like, what are you guys breaking down with the writing portion of these?
Well, these ships kept getting more and more complicated, and like we went to a lot of local places, but then people started saying, let's do something really big. So Andalusia, we arranged to rent a house. We had a guy who took us around to various places to paint, and it describes the different cities. We went to 4 or 5 different cities around in Andalusia and painted,
which is southern Spain, if you guys don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, so the book tries to describe these sites, and every plein air painting has a story behind it. Some of them are interesting enough to write about, so we put some of those stories in the book, and we always joke about what the tourists how the tourists interact with us. So some of those tourist interactions are in there also. I like to get pictures of people painting and the scene and the painting all in one shot. So some of those are in there.
And unfortunately, the reason I bring up the books for everyone listening and watching is that fortunately Jim had the idea and the follow through to make these books happen, which then captures the weekend or the trip or the workshop, which if we hadn't done, they would have came and went. But now we have a whole history of Location 1980, specifically, just if nothing else, just from specifically to Jim's workshops that he set up. So this is another one we have. I'm just going to read a few of the titles, and we'll post some of these in the
we'll splice in some shots.
Yeah, and so this one's the most famous nudes ever painted. So the idea was that we would recreate some of the more master paintings. you know, everybody knows the Mona Lisa, so we would set up something similar. We'd hire a model, pose her like the Mona Lisa, and then we would all do our versions of that. And let's see, we have another one here.
Yeah, that's in those cases, we actually have a screen, a projection screen behind the model that somehow directs the attention toward what the original painting was, and you can kind of be inspired by the original painting.
I think the Egypt one was probably one of the more specific ones. So like we'd like put Ramsey's tomb behind her.
Oh, nice.
It's a 4 foot by 8 foot screen, so the model's laying on the model box like she normally would be, but instead of looking at the back of the studio, you're looking at, you know, Ramsey's tomb, and she's in full costume like Cleopatra. And so it really did help you kind of take some left turns in your what you would create.
I got the inspiration for that book. I went to a show of Sorolla. He's one of my favorite artists. I didn't even know he painted nudes, but he's got a painting, and it's a life-size painting.
It's in London.
It's in London. It's in the National Gallery, and it's called the Mujer de Nudis, the nude female. And it was so beautiful that I wanted to do a book around it, and that gave me the idea of all these different famous people that had been painted, and that was one of the ones we include in the book. So we had the painting in the background so people can be inspired by it, and we got it has a wonderful pink silk sheet in it that the model's laying on. We found a sheet just like that and set the figure up just like he had done, and so we have people the opportunity to do something like Sorolla did.
Yeah, and it's a fun program.
It's a great way to reach into history and challenge yourself. You know, instead of just trying to be like nowadays, everything's AI art or everything's digital, or there's this forward avant-garde art happening too. But Jim had a good idea to reach into the past and take a stab at recreating some of those master paintings and see what you could do. And after you go through one of these exercises, it can't help but you can't help but be influenced by it. So
we brought it all the way up to the modern day when one of location 1980 regular models is a Wonder Woman look like. We said we'll paint Wonder Woman nude. So we brought her in full costume, and little by little in the painting she removes the costume, and so you can paint whatever you like with it. So it's got Wonder Woman as being one of the most famous women ever painted.
Yeah, that was a good session.
I'd love to see the results of that one. That was a little bit before I got here.
We got a bunch of them. Thanks for chronicling our journey here, Jim.
Well, and I think kind of what directed you into this book topic is there's a couple of these. Like I see this one, we got the I Believe in Angels, and then we got the Art of the Muse here. And correct me if I'm wrong, with those, you're more chronicling not necessarily a specific occurrence as much as like this process of the figure drawing for folks who they maybe don't know what the deal is, that there's more to it. There's more meat to this that you can sink your teeth into, and that's kind of what you guys put together in some of these as well.
Yeah, and it kept getting more and more complicated ideas. Like at one point we decided let's do a big painting and have like 6 different models. So the book's called 6 Muses, 1 Masterpiece. So people brought in big canvases. We picked out a scene that had 5 or 6 ladies in it, and we would set those things up one by one, and people work for like 4 or 5 months on the same painting.
It's like the slowest montage ever.
With different
just keep
models.
adding them. My version's in your...
I'll say the one that's hanging right outside there, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a fun exercise.
It really was, but I appreciate you chronicling this, Jim. And now they've spawned other books. I think we're about ready to do another one. Terrell's working on one now, so we'll come up to that. Jim, I wanted to ask you specifically about the holographic imaging. Like, what would you do? What do you do now with that? Or do you still have the museum, or you wanted to have a museum? A hologram museum?
Yeah, there's because holography is so important in my career. I've got fingers in everything, and so one of the things I do, I have a charitable organization. It's called PHASE, and PHASE stands for Preserving Holography for the Arts, Sciences, and Education. And so we have a collection, and we have a lot of materials. Since I knew a lot of the people in the history of holography, I have a lot of historical stuff. And PHASE has the objective to put together a museum and give it to some other institute who will take it and incorporate it. And so I've been talking to various museums about incorporating it into some of their other collection. And eventually that will happen. Right now we're making contributions to some of the art holography has had such a struggle. It's just not been it hasn't been accepted by the art community or by the public.
What's the main knock on holographic art? Every time I see one, I'm blown away. It's awesome.
Most people are like that. They get blown away, but yet when you try to get the art community to support it, it's too scientific. It's too technical. And the art community seems to reject it. There's not an art museum in the world now that has a holography collection.
Wow.
There's some that are planning it, but it just hasn't been accepted.
Do you see a parallel with the new AI artists? Because this seems to...
It's probably going to be the same sort of thing. And whether the public really accepts AI art, it's hard to know. We're still working to try to get the public to accept holographic art, but
maybe if they do AI holographic art, you put them together.
Oh, maybe so. Maybe so.
That's my contribution. That's all I got.
That's one hell of an idea. Let's get some investors. I'm ready.
Yeah, we're ready for it.
There were some artists, as I said, like Salvador Dali and Don Close. They're two artists I know that started working with holography, and they didn't take it very far.
Yeah.
Dali did a few things, the flowing clocks and that sort of thing. And those are in collections, and they're valuable because they've got Salvador Dali associated with them. But none of the other artists are doing very well with holography. There's a whole art community. There's a website called Holography and Facebook that has the art community, and they're always trying to figure out how to get themselves accepted as artists.
Do you have any other questions regarding holography?
Yeah, I'd love to pull that thread a little, yeah. And maybe I definitely am obviously not nearly as thoroughly informed on it as you are, so maybe you can explain this to the casual viewer and listener here. But the process, it is a direct physical creation of some original real object, right? Like almost in the way that what you're doing with a photograph and the film and the way that it's getting, exposed to light and dark elements. It's not an imageal, that's not a word, but it's not a visual recreation the way a painting is, where like I'm interpreting it and then I'm laying stuff on, but you're using an actual physical object and a specific technique that recreates it in this other format. Is that accurate? It's
more related to photography than it is to probably like painting.
Yeah.
Because as you say, the way a hologram is made is it's made with laser light.
Right.
And you light up the object, and you have a recording photographic plate or digital, whatever you're going to record it with, that catches some of that light. But that light is mixed with a second laser beam called the reference wave, and it forms what's called a diffraction pattern on this recording material. So it's using a process called diffractive optics. It's not refractive optics like regular photography uses.
Right.
So when you've got a hologram, it actually is a recording of the actual object or person or whatever the object is. And when you illuminate it again with a reference wave, those waves, it's kind of like programmed so that those waves then bend so they actually come from that object.
Yeah.
And so you've got a true three-dimensional image behind the hologram that you can see with your eyes. It's all by the process of diffraction.
And when you say diffractive, you're talking like slight shifts in the wavelength because it's getting reflected, or the phasing of it being slightly shifted, and that's what's getting received and picked up?
It's actually the direction of the light. So if you've got a reference beam, and this diffraction or this hologram is built such that if a light wave hits it, it bends it in the right direction so that the new ray is coming from an object, from an image of an object. And so all over this plate, the rays are being bent so that they look like they're coming from a three-dimensional object.
Okay.
And so what you're seeing is a true three-dimensional image back there, because all the rays are coming from the right place.
Science. Love it.
That's the thing. You know, you say it's like, it's maybe the art community is not picking it up because it's a little too complex. But I feel someone like yourself could make a pretty easy distillation of at least the big principles of this. And if people could just sink their teeth into that first bit, you know, just get like one finger hook onto the rock, then they would, whoa, holy shit, this is really cool.
I think Jim's the guy to bridge the gap.
Then maybe that's the point that I'm making without even realizing it here.
That's awesome.
We're trying to do that with digital holography, because now you can actually, the recording can actually be made with a camera. And it's a digital recording of that diffraction pattern. And then electronically you can, it's called reconstructing. You reconstruct the light rays so that they come from this three-dimensional object. So those systems eventually, because it's mostly software, those systems can be used and understood by people who use computers.
Okay.
And hopefully this may teach more the general public what holography can actually do.
Yeah, because I think if they could get a grip on it, they'd be pretty darn interested in it.
Maybe so. The other problem with holographic art is that when you're using photographic materials and lasers, all this stuff is expensive. So a good holography setup can cost $30,000, $40,000.
Oh, dude, they don't sell that at Michael's, at the local art store.
So it's not something that anybody can afford. Usually artists are poor anyway, so to make holograms takes. And the photographic materials are very expensive as well.
Jim, we're in 2024, and you're about to head over to England, take a little vacay. What do you have going on this year in art that's going to be different? What are you looking forward to, or do you have any?
I hope I can do some more of these themed workshops. We had started one when the pandemic started called the Love Project. We were building a series of paintings around the idea of love.
Which is a pretty wide angle lens.
Yeah.
How many did we do?
It was shut down during the pandemic, so I may try to restart it or come up with a different theme.
And you're gonna? You think you'll paint when you're over in Flitwick? Didn't you get accepted to the Society of Flitwick more artists over there or something?
Oh, that's the other thing is, you know, as we travel, I'm getting back to traveling again after being shut down for so long. The last time I went to England, I met some of the local artists, and I painted with some of those artists before. So I organized the first paint out in Flitwick, and we had a group of locals. We had about a dozen artists that showed up, and they loved it. They painted in the same moor that you and I painted in when you visited.
That's great. It's neat to see that you just have to have that idea and send out an invite, and the artist will come. So
yeah,
Jim's like the Pied Piper with all the artists.
Yeah,
that's great. Do you think you'll paint them more? I mean, I don't know how the weather is in February.
It's probably not. I have painted down there when it was freezing, and that's. There have been times when I've suddenly realize that I'm freezing and I got to get out of there.
Yeah.
So
you'll turn into a statue.
I'll probably do at least some drawing during my next trip, but
that's good.
Now I used to spend 3 or 4 months a year there, when I get back to that stage, then I'll try to organize more art on the local scene.
And then what about here? Have you been to any local art shows? That we have the new, what's it,
ACMA, Orange County Museum of Art.
Yeah, ACMA, and then the Broad. And have you been to some of these museums here, Jim, lately?
I went to I've been going to some of the museums. Like I went to the museum. It's in Santa Ana when they had a show of the Japanese art.
Yeah.
And the new modern art facility at South
That's
Coast.
ACMA. Yeah. Okay. So you have been.
That one, I was kind of hoping that might be a candidate for donating holograms to. So I like going to there.
Yeah.
They have a nice cafeteria also.
Yeah, it's a nice place. That's the Orange County Museum of Modern Art.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's mostly all modern art.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice.
They got workshops and like regular artist talks and stuff over there.
Yeah, we're a little spoiled here in Orange County. There's definitely some good patronage throughout the county. And what about L.A., Jim? Have you gone up there and gone to the Broad or to the LACMA any time you're here recently? Or
not recently. I talked to the Getty people back early on because they actually have a hologram collection that they're not showing.
Yeah,
and
like most museums, they have 4,000 pieces in the basement that nobody will ever see.
Some people donated their art, some really valuable art, to them, and they just haven't come up to dedicating a studio to it. I think that again, it's the public and art people not quite accepting holography.
Oh, right.
So eventually, I hope they. I looked at the L.A. Museum of Art. It also has scientific stuff. Where they have the space shuttle and stuff like that there. So I had maybe they might be a good candidate.
Well, keep leaning on them. Never know. Eric, you got any other questions for Jim regarding his art endeavors, art career, art history?
Well, we've got, for everybody that's on the video, we got a piece that you've done here at Monument Valley in the background of the studio. And I guess I'd say what led you to choose that to be what you wanted to display of everything you could have brought tonight to showcase on our episode?
Monument Valley was our first paint out that I really organized with, kind of in conjunction with Location 1980, was Death Valley. People loved the desert. So we started marching around and painting different deserts. We painted Joshua Tree National Park. We painted the
Alabama Hills
Desert, and everybody loved it. Those were close. You could drive to those. And we said, I always wanted to paint Monument Valley. So let's go to Monument Valley. So we got enough drivers and vans and stuff. We took 7 or 8 people there.
Yeah, it was... it blew us away. What we're looking at here is a few of the, I don't know, is that the Mitten Butte?
Yeah, actually, we had cabins that you could literally see this from the back porch of your cabin.
That's incredible.
It was unbelievable. Yeah, for artists who paint landscapes, and most of us are at least partially professional landscape painters, myself included, it was a dream. You open the door, and there it is, and it's iconic. I mean, we were watching at night. I think we were watching old John Wayne movies, because once the sun goes down, you're pretty much done making art that day.
Yeah. You
could do the critique and go to dinner, but then you still got a couple hours to kill. So we were YouTubing old John Wayne movies. Now it's what always has been sacred land, Navajo Nation. That basically white people are like, oh, we'll just trample all over this to make this John Wayne movie. So like, there's places out there now you can't even go unless you're with a Navajo guide on a horse. But back when they were making these movies, they had, just to get a take, they had like 100 horses and wagons and just tearing up the whole land. And like they was, all right, we got the shot we needed. But now it's like, fortunately, it's completely sacred and you can't do any of that. But so when we try to capture it anyway, Jim did a great job. This is a watercolor, is it not, Jim?
Yes.
18 by 24 maybe, or maybe 11 by 14. Jim, you paint mostly in watercolor when we're...
Yeah, especially the plein air, it's just easier to manage. I do some with oils, but in this particular case, we were there for 4 or 5 days, and you could paint 2 or 3 paintings in each day. And people were getting up before sunrise because it's beautiful at sunrise. And so a lot of paintings were done, but a lot of them were sold and transferred to other places. And I had 2 or 3 left of these from that trip. And this is one of my favorites. They're called the mittens because they look like a hand with a...
Like a vertical hand with a thumb. Yeah. But, we all had several of those paintings. You know, Jim, looking at it makes me want to go back. I think it might be time.
That's a place we should go back to.
Those cabins, that deal was something sweet. And there's a bunch of them, so you can have 2 or 3 all rented out and pack them with artists. And by the time you get out of there, you got a whole collection of art, you know, from all the different artists. There's several more in this room, actually, because I have one of Winnie's. We traded, we bartered.
We've got a book on this one also, I think.
That's right here. The Magnificent Six. Monument Valley.
That was us. Yeah, I think there's a good picture on the back there. There I took that. It's Jim and Pauline having a moment. That was good times out there. Well, Jim, we'll have to put it together. Do you have any remarks or anything regarding Location 1980? I mean, you're here now. We've been blessed to have you as a friend and a contributor.
Actually, when I started art here in California, I took classes at Orange Coast and Coastline, and I met a lot of people there that were really good friends, and it gave me a place. The only place I could get models at that time was like at Orange County
Community College.
They had a lot of models. And then somewhere during that period, we also, Laguna Plein Air painters had a lot of models, so I painted with them some. But then that's when I discovered Jesse. And this was like a gift from heaven. A place like Location 1980, I could see then it had such potential, and Jesse's done such a fantastic job growing this into a really major art center in Costa Mesa. And so, and it's 10 minutes away from my home. So it's a perfect place. We have wonderful models. We have great artists. I've learned so much from the artists here, including Jesse. Someday I'm going to learn to paint like Jesse, maybe.
Likewise.
So we've had such a good friendship, and I've learned so much from Location 1980 and met a lot of people here, and it's added to inspirations for doing art. So places like this keep me going.
We're definitely pleased to hear that.
We need more places like 1980, and we'd like to get in touch with more, like to inspire other art houses that can be a contributing member to the community by gathering creatives together. Jim represents the upper echelon of our age category, and then we have artists that are as young as 18, so it's neat to see that we're doing something where everybody, regardless of your age or your background, can come together and make some art. It's a good glue to hold our community together here. Do you have any other questions for Jim?
Well, gosh, that's like one of those, how much time you got?
Yeah. Well, we got a few minutes left. Jim's on the pitch clock here, so we're going to wrap it up. But if you could think of something in the next few minutes before we sign off.
Well, gosh, the biggest thing, I just want to say thank you. Because Jesse's telling stories about you all the time, and always with a smile. And I know I see you at Figure Drawn not quite every week. He's there every week. I'm not there every week. But
I do a pretty good impersonation of Jim, too. So it's good you get to witness that. But go ahead.
No, it's very inspirational, and you know, you've got this quiet purposefulness that I see going on at every figure drawing, where there's some folks, including myself, who are very noisy individuals. And then you look at the work, though, and it's always great. And I love seeing that. I love having that through line, you know, that it goes back further than even I've been here, and to see that continuing. It says a lot about what this place is and what art can be for people. So I really appreciate that. And
really,
so this has been a fun opportunity for me, you know, to sit down and do this.
Getting into figure painting here at Location 19, that's the place where I had a reliable, regular place where I could go get great models and have wonderful, talented artists around. I get ideas from them. And I started seeing figures everywhere. Even when we went to the desert, you can see the figures in the sand dunes and the mountains, the trees. And I painted some of these in. The next thing you know, other people are painting them in. Eventually, people were painting figures into the sand dunes and into the trees and things like that. So we were teaching each other. So I thank Jesse for providing something that I would never have gotten anywhere else.
And that particular filter has become, we haven't quite named it yet, but I know Nakamura and Winnie, and we've all done it now. It's contagious. Is when you start blending the...
I've seen some work like that. It is really cool.
That's fun. It's good times. Yeah, also, Jim, I want to say thanks for coming on. Now, this is your... you've done lectures and keynote speeches and talked to big rooms of people before, but you never did a podcast before. So
I've never done podcasts. That's a new invention, sort of.
Well, we appreciate it because we're just getting started, and we look forward to having a lot of other accomplished artists and guests. And I think that having you on is really important for us to let all of our new and growing audience to know that we're really casting a wide net for all of our artists from a science background and different industries, but where the rubber meets the road here at 1980, we all make art together. So thanks for coming in, Jim.
I feel honored to have been invited to come in. I'm still interested in seeing the outcome of all these things, but it's really an honor, and I thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, well, we'll see how popular the episode is. You know, it's going to be funny too now. So once it is edited, and then Eric and I both went through this, because nowadays the podcasts are fairly popular, and you listen to your favorite guy, your favorite whatever, it could be guy, girl, technology podcast, acting, whatever it is. But then when it's your voice and your your whole script or whatever, and then when you watch yourself, it's a little different. So you might get a kick out of it. And we're growing, and we're trying to keep it going. So this is important, and we're also in our new digs. So for those of you watching or just listening, we upgraded the studio a bit.
Yeah, it's
upgraded some equipment.
Our first permanent. Well, everything's flexible in 1980, but this is far more permanent than our last setup. Say that.
Yeah, so that should allow us to bring us more frequent guests and frequent podcasts, and we'd like to share with everyone. But with that, we're going to sign off for another episode, Location 1980 Art Podcast. Thank you guys for listening and watching on YouTube. If you'd like to support us, please leave a like or comment or review. We could use everything, every critique that we can get.
Most importantly, tell your friends.
Yeah. Spread the.
Keep up the good work.
Make sure that the holographic community knows about the podcast. Maybe they'll listen. We might have gave more airtime to holograms than anybody all year, probably. So.
Yeah, it could be.
Well, we'll keep it going. So thanks so much for you guys listening. I think that's going to be a wrap.
Yeah. I'll see you Wednesday at Figure.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, Jim. That's awesome.